Hello, this is Dr. Harriet Fraad, bringing you the podcast, Capitalism Hits Home, a podcast about how capitalism, how the government, politics, and economics impact personal life in the United States, and how personal life also has an impact on our politics. This is a podcast that is brought to you by Democracy at Work. As part of that, I want to really talk about what the Trump presidency has in store for us. For the men who voted for Trump, quite numerously, and for the 53% of white women who voted for Trump. So let's start with what's in store for American men who voted so numerously for Donald Trump. Well, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, both billionaires, are the chiefs of governmental efficiency. They want to get rid of waste, the kind of waste that protects people primarily. They want one thing that's high on their docket is to savage government jobs. 3 million Americans have government jobs, and most of them are male. And at least 42% are over 50. So when they lose their jobs, it will be unlikely that they will easily get other jobs, particularly not jobs with decent salaries and benefits that government workers have fought for. It will be the hardest for minority men and women. The government sector is known for equality and diversity, so that Black and ethnic Americans are treated fairly within governmental jobs. 40% of governmental workers are men, and are Black men. Those Black men who voted for Trump may really regret it, because they will be more well treated within a government job than they will in the private sector. In addition, I have to remember they're billionaires, Musk and Ramaswamy, have voted to cut veterans' benefits. Who are veterans? Primarily men. So those men who champion Trump will regret it. That's really dangerous. And one of the most dangerous areas will be cut is an 89% male area, and that is construction. OSHA protects construction workers. Even with OSHA protection, construction, which is 89% male, as I said, is the most dangerous job in America. More construction workers died on the job last year than in any other industry. So those people will suffer. And those people are overwhelmingly men, many of whom either voted for Donald Trump or didn't vote at all. Men who voted for Trump in order to gain their status, make America great again, which means make America go back to the 1950s, where racial segregation was far worse, but where America was far more prosperous. Because we were the kings of the world, every other major economy was destroyed by the war, whether it was Japan's or Germany's or France's or England's, and China, which in the 1950s was recovering from being savaged by Japan in World War II, and then also suffering actually benefiting from, but also suffering a revolution in their own country. So they certainly couldn't compete. So men who voted for Trump in order to regain their status as employed people who in the 50s, if they were white, had dependent wives and children and decent wages, family wages, can forget it. That's not coming back. There's another way that men will suffer, and that's through divorce. Because as it is, with women having to work outside the home in order to sustain a household, women no longer want to come home to a second job of doing emotional care for men, sexual care for men, connecting men to their children and their relatives, and doing all the domestic work, the cleaning, the cooking, the decorating, the inviting guests and then cleaning up for them and cleaning up after they're gone. That will be even worse. Men are badly off these days, which is why when you hear about a mass murder, they're all men. This will get worse. So those men who voted for Trump thinking they would be reinstated as heads of household forgot that the capitalists won't let them do that. And trouble is coming, not only on an economic and job front, but also on a personal front. And men are more dependent than women generally. They depend on women to take care of them, and they will be more lost. Well, what's up for women? Particularly addressing this to the 53% of white women who voted for Trump. Well, women's reproductive care will now be a service for wealthy women and wealthy women only. And one part of that is legal safe abortion. Not legal, but safe abortions were always available for wealthy women. There was always some well-paid private gynecologist who would perform an abortion for women in their office, or they could go to other places. Puerto Rico had abortion mills, so did many other places. And Planned Parenthood will now be defunded. One of the things that J.D. Vance announced is that President Donald Trump is consistent in his views that we must defund Planned Parenthood. Well, Planned Parenthood is America's leading provider of high-quality sex education and affordable sexual care and reproductive health care. Planned Parenthood provides care more than any other source for American women. 20% of women get their reproductive care from Planned Parenthood. They not only provide abortions, which they do, but they also test for sexually transmitted infections, give cures for sexually transmitted infections. They screen for cancer. So 1 in 5 women will now do without their reproductive health care because they relied on the quality care provided for them by Planned Parenthood across this nation. More than 100 lawmakers, led by Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee, and, of course, the House pro-life chairman, Representative Chris Smith, Republican of New Jersey, are asking for an investigation of the amount of federal funding that's been given to health centers who provide abortions, as well as the rest of women's health care. Now, what would be the result? Well, before Roe versus Wade and abortion became legal, there was a high rate of death and injury because women don't just give up on abortions when they can't afford to have another child, or they will be left without a job and pregnant, or they're abandoned with a child, or they have too many children to care for as it is. Scholars estimate that about a quarter of pregnancies ended in abortion before Roe versus Wade. In the 50s and 60s, just about 200,000 women died from botched abortions that were illegal. So, aside from the hundreds of women who died from botched abortions, there were many, many other afflictions. Of course, minority women suffered the most. In the early 50s and 60s, the early 60s, 50% of childbirth-related deaths were from botched abortion of minority women. 20% of deaths were from botched abortions around pregnancy and childbirth by white women, and 50% by minority women. In summary, Trump's policies will affect the disappearance or near disappearance of affordable reproductive health care for women. So those 53% of white women who voted for Trump may regret it. Another privation for women will be their privation as mothers and carers of children. When Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk recommended cuts, they recommended cuts for SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, which is especially useful for mothers who can't provide food for their children. And I should mention, though I will discuss it later, that 1 in 5 American children doesn't get enough to eat. Mothers are already America's poorest adults, and one of the predictors of poverty in the United States is having a child, which is now between 47 and 50% of American women don't want children and don't have them. It's too expensive. So all poor people will now be punished with hunger, because that's what Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy figure is excess fat in the budget. Rape is another aspect of women's lives, which will really increase. That is an increase in the United States. 1 in 5 American women is already raped. And that, although really terrible, is a vast improvement, in large part accomplished by the Me Too movement, by feminist consciousness. However, now that the commander-in-chief is accused of rape and convicted of sexual assault, he has 25 sexual assault allegations, and he also recorded his statement about grabbing pussy. Things are bad. They're looking very bad for rape of women and girls. Trump's suggested cabinet picks also include sex abusers, or at least accused sex abusers. Hegseth, Minister of Defense, has an undisclosed police report about sexual assault. He also says women should not get divorced and should have many children, although he's had a couple of marriages and many children with whom he doesn't live. Robert F. Kennedy, Health Secretary, has an allegation of sexual abuse of a babysitter. Trump's first pick for district attorney was accused of sex trafficking as well as drugging young women, people underage. Trump didn't withdraw his Matt Gaetz's name. It was Matt Gaetz who dropped out when it looked like it would become known that there was an ethics report on Gaetz by Congress, which was rather damning. There's also Elon Musk, whose workplace has a reputation for gross misogyny and who paid one woman $250,000, $250,000, to settle a sexual assault claim. Finally, Trump's education secretary, who's Linda McMahon, was named as an enabler of the rape of boys at the World Wrestling Entertainment Foundation when they received numerous reports of rape by a man named Phillips, who was the head of the cruise that handled the production of the wrestling matches, promising these young boys that they would have access to lucrative jobs and be learning wrestling, and then raping them. She did nothing. What's in store for American children? Well, even before Trump's election, American children were America's poorest people. Between 1 out of 5 and 1 out of 6 U.S. children already lives in poverty, even though we are the richest nation in the world. And even though we are the richest, 23 countries are ahead of us in terms of the well-being of their children. So that with 1 out of 5 or 6 children in poverty, we are dooming children to very hard lives. And those lives mean privation in healthcare, privation in hunger, privation in dangerous and inadequate housing, which is where poor people have to live, and privation in homelessness. You know, for a while, I worked with homeless children. Most children at around 8 years old, when they draw a house, they have a line. The house is standing on the line. It's a box with a rectangular roof. There's a tree, which is basically 2 straight lines on a circle indicating tree, and little V's, which are birds flying. When homeless children draw a house, the house is in the air, and so is the tree, as well as the birds. Their lives are in the air. They're frightened and insecure. 1 out of 8 New York City school children is homeless, and we are dooming them of a very hard time. And homeless services are yet another area where billionaires, Elon Musk and Ramaswamy, want to, quote, cut out the fat. These children, of course, who are homeless have behavioral issues. They're frightened and they're angry and they can't concentrate often because they have too many adjustments they have to make. Children are America's future. Doesn't look good. So what do we do now with these impending disasters for men, women, and children? Well, we have to remember it's our work that keeps America running. You look out the window, you see the sidewalk in New York City, you see buildings if you're not in New York City, you see trees planted, you see sidewalks. It's all built by people. You pick up your phone, which is staffed by people who invented the means of using the phone and who keep it up. Everything is created by our work. And even though they don't teach us that, it's evident once we know. The books we read, the programs we listen to, they represent the labor of people. Therefore, if we withhold our labor, if we join a left popular front of all the left groups, including progressive labor, climate saviors, the women's movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, and the sexual rights movements together with economic justice being like an umbrella, with the central post being economic justice, and the unity of all of us combining to take back our country so that employment can be in cooperatives, so that employees who are the 3% can be replaced by employers who are 3% can be replaced by employees who are 97% making the decisions that affect their lives. So that we can have the things that other countries have that have strong socialist or communist parties, whether it's free healthcare, free after-school care programs, free education programs, free retirement programs, all of which we need and we deserve. France has done it, and they won. The Popular Front of France won. Also, the unity of all left groups won in Chile. They won the presidency. That's who won abortion rights in Ireland and in Argentina, heavily Catholic countries. And in Argentina, the Pope himself went to Argentina, where he comes from, to tell people not to vote for abortion rights. But the indigenous movement there joined with the women's movement, joined with progressive labor unions, joined with the climate activist movement and the sexual rights movement and all other movements. And they won, and we can too. We have to remember that things look bleak, but we can take back our country. Thank you. Goodbye.